there was so much shame around having substance use disorder, about acknowledging that I had a problem. So I have shame about this. I have shame about mental health. I have shame about gender identity. Like all of these things that just weigh on a person and keep us separate from because we feel so bad. And that's the beauty of recovery, is that we speak so openly about all of these things that we get to show up and say, hey, I love you in spite of this thing that you feel bad about yourself. Mm-hmm. And I can relate to it because I've had similar experiences. Like, that is so powerful. When we can replace that shame with love, that's when like real magic and real change happens.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III, he, him pronouns.
Liz McKean, she, her pronouns.
And I got a mosquito bite. So how do you feel about that,
Liz? There's no such thing as behind the scenes in the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. And we've just have that curtain wide open all the time. I'm happy for you with your mosquito bites, because apparently it's something that we feel proud of on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. We're proud of our mosquito bites this way. How's your energy?
My energy is great. Yeah, it's a good day. We didn't have our regular work week this week because it was a holiday on Monday. And so I'm a little off kilter as far as what day it is. But honestly, that's usually the case. I just have an excuse for it this week. So good. Yeah. So yeah, same. How about you?
Yeah, excuses are good. I feel like I'll never know what day it is. Like, I have to refer to my calendar at least twice a day, just to make sure that I'm in the same day that I thought that I was when the day began. I'm feeling good. As a matter of fact, I was sad yesterday, and I don't know why. And I'm still working to integrate that. Sometimes emotions happen, and I think I built up a understanding where I don't push them away. I kind of sit in them to figure out what they're there to tell me. I reach out to the people who I know I need to reach out to and just be open and honest about what I'm experiencing. And I just allow for the experience. So I think there's still a bit of integration going on from that experience. But feeling good. Glad to be here with our guest today. And who is that, Liz?
I'm so excited about our guest today. So today we have Joie with us, who is a queer, sober activist and advocate that works to normalize folks in the world that are oftentimes othered. She uses her own lived experiences to help give voice to those that sometimes don't know how or aren't given the chance to speak up and speak out against the inequalities that permeate our culture today. She's also a beautiful writer. And we're so excited to have this conversation and hear her story. So welcome, Joie. How are you today?
What's up, Joie?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much. Joey, she, her, you said it, but I like to restate it. I'm super excited to be here, just so I feel like we're all on the level playing field. Mosquitoes don't mess with me. I don't know why. They're just not interested. So I'm super grateful.
I've had that similar experience. So this is just like the first, and it might have been a spider. I don't know, because it's a pretty big bump. But like, I usually am that person when we're in spaces and everybody is getting eaten up. I'm like, they're not biting me. They're not that big of a deal. So I'm thinking that they don't rock with me or something like that. You know, there's a specific blood type that like mosquitoes don't like.
And there's some that they do, like, so my husband is one of those people that nobody's getting bit. There's no bugs for miles and miles and miles. We could be in probably winter for all I know. And he is just he'll be like, I'm getting destroyed. Like, I'm getting so bit up. And everyone's like, shut you. Oh my God. Like, if you want to leave, just leave, you know? And like, we'll get home and he is just bitten up. Like, he's got just bites all over him. So he's like I don't even know what, like, my best defense, because when I'm around him, he's got the blood type or whatever it is that they are all about him, and I am safe from the mosquitoes. So
that's so interesting, because there's a scientific reason. I just thought they were like, oh, we don't want nothing to do with her shady past, so we just save her.
that blood has some color on it. I don't want none of that.
Oh my God, mosquitoes are so judgy, rude. Whatever, you can't have my blood anyway.
Joie, we're happy to have you here. I'm excited about this conversation. We'll start the conversation out by just asking you, how's your energy today?
My energy, I have to tell you, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to have a conversation with both of you. I come into this conversation open, and I always think that it's so important to not only speak, but to listen, because that is where the real opportunity for me comes in. I think so many times when people are conversing, it's like they're just waiting to say that next thing, and they're missing what the person in front of them is saying. So I always try to practice just being open and listening.
That's a beautiful thing to pull out, especially like talking to podcast hosts, because I feel like that's our job, to kind of like keep the conversation moving and flowing. And so but even beyond that, like my natural inclination is to me. I don't know why. I don't know what that is. And I've tried to beat myself up about it, and that didn't work. So it's just like I have to allow for it. But like my natural inclination is to be about me. And so there's multiple times where like somebody is sharing and I have to bring myself back. And it's like, oh, be here with this person and see who it is that they're showing you that they are. Honor the fact that this person is sharing what they're sharing with you, and really like open, like make eye contact, look at their body, like smell the wind in this moment, and be here with this person and create that space to where you can hold what it is that they're sharing with you.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that.
I feel like that's, I don't think that's, I'm glad you said that you're not beating yourself up about that anymore, Bryce, because that's a natural human thing. We're just, of course, we're going to have ourselves first. And I understand that you're saying that more so than you'd like it to be. And it's a conscious effort to not, be thinking about what you're going to say when somebody else is talking. But just the fact that you even think about it that way is amazing. And I feel like you and I are similar in this. And I think we've had this conversation. If not, I've had it in my own head. I'm all about me in my own head. That sometimes I know some of us, and I have friends like this too, where the way we relate to someone is when the way I'm showing that I'm listening is you're telling me something that happened to you, and me being like, oh my gosh, that happened to me, isn't me trying to make it about me. It's me saying, I hear you. I'm with you. I actually really feel what you're feeling. And that, there's some scenarios where that can be really not a supportive way to communicate. Yeah. So learning that, just like an awareness is helpful, and also knowing we're always going to screw it up, and just, being willing to grow.
Yeah. I think what Bryce, what you touched on too, like body language is it's so important, because like Liz, what you're saying, like how we converse with someone, like we can tell from their body whether they're like, oh yeah, me too, I get that, or if it's like, oh, like we're making this conversation about you, and it's about, this dialogue here. So yeah, I think it's not just what we're saying. It's paying attention to the whole package.
Yeah, and it's really like who we are. And, as an artist, as a musician, as an MC, like a lot of what it is that I create has been based off of what it is that I appreciated. So, I would hear people that were skillful. I would hear people that would tell stories. I would hear people that would like paint pictures with words. And it's like, oh, I wanted to do that, but for me. And it's kind of the same with like interpersonal relationship. Like I think to the times that I really felt seen or heard, or felt like a space was created, and like I felt like, just being in your presence, like without you touching me, is like a hug, and it's like letting me know that I can show up exactly as I am. And then I think how I can recreate that, or like random texts that I received that somebody's thinking of me, and then, how can I recreate that feeling that I experienced for somebody else? And that kind of informs how it is that I show up. Because even body language, like you being leaned in and like attentive and eye contact, and like I can really tell if you tapped in. Because you could be like actively listening and reflecting, and I can kind of tell like that there's an objective to it too, you know? So it's just the intricacies to intimacy. I think for me, it's important that I'm able to tell, just so I know the context of like the interaction. But like when I'm looking to create it, I think that just starts with like my relationship with myself. Like it's not about like, this is how I show up these itty bitty ways, this is how I can, like I got to show up like this. It's just like, you know, my intention, what my relationship with myself is, and how can I share that with this person in front of me.
I love that.
Yep. I love that too.
That's great.
Well, now that we've gotten all meta and talked about communication and talking and listening, I always wanted to say meta on the podcast. Let's hear from you, Joie. I know that you are a person, just from our previous conversations and, you know, before we scheduled this podcast, that recovery is a word that you use when you talk about your own journey. So if you'd like to just start to share a little bit about your recovery journey. I've heard that it's very linear, just like all of ours are, just from A to B and start, middle, finish, all better, right?
Exactly. Done.
Done.
Got it. Sealed. You know, mailed. Yes. So, I mean, recovery has been a journey, is such a perfect word for it, because it has been exploration, it has been adventure, it has been all the things, a roller coaster. When I grew up, the way I grew up in my house, drugs were very normalized. I mean, I grew up in a household where, you know, there were drugs, and drugs were sold, and drugs were bought, and, you know, and I saw that. And so like growing up, there wasn't a lot of stigma around it. My mom is a normie, whatever that, you know, like she doesn't have addiction problems with substances. Neither of my sisters have substance use disorders. I seem to be the one that that got the gift that keeps on giving. But my recovery journey started in 2007. I was sober for 2.5 years, and I did a lot of things that you're told not to do. You know, like I made him my higher power, and that's never a good thing, because then when he went out, I followed. And what I have discovered in my recovery is that there are so many layers, and there are so many things to recover from. You know, it's like you take drugs and alcohol away, and then I'm just left with me. And the layers of me and the evolution of me, like they just keep coming. And I have found oftentimes that I didn't have, or I didn't trust the tools. So I picked up the old tools because that's what I knew worked for me. Or I went back to the people and the places where I felt like I belonged, or that would accept me. And so, you know, for me, it's like every time I discover something new about myself, I discover a new way that applies to my recovery as well. Like a huge turning point for me in my recovery as a human, from the human experience, like from emotional trauma, from societal trauma, from all these things, was when I started really allowing myself to live authentically. And what that looked like for me was that I had years and years and years of transphobia. It was so deep that I couldn't look at it within myself. I've been queer pretty much my whole life. I mean, like, since, you know, I remember being 6 years old and kids calling me, you know, derogatory names on the playground. And I remember not relating to the kids because the boys were playing football and I wanted to play Barbies with my sisters. And so, you know, from a very young age, before I even had an identity, like an identity was given to me. Like, this is who you are, you know, you're a queer kid. And so, like, I sort of grew up with that. And Bryce, you said something about being seen. And it's like, so where could I see myself in the world? And there were plenty of gay people. I grew up on the north side of Chicago, which is historically known as Boys Town. I started dancing at a very young age. I was around lots of gay people. And so that was the identity that I took on. I didn't realize how deeply that affected my authenticity. And identity is so important for me because I feel like not only am I having a human experience, I'm also having a spiritual experience. And in order for me to truly connect on a deeper level with people, I need to allow myself to be who I am. And so I had this block where I could not truly connect, not just with you, but with myself. And, they talk about like being rigorously honest when you get sober. And I had no idea what that meant because I couldn't be honest with me. So how can I expect to evolve and grow deep and meaningful, real connections if I can't be honest with me because I can't show you who I am?
Yeah.
And so I feel like my transition with my gender identity unlocked something in my recovery that I had been missing the whole time.
Amazing. I feel like we don't really get tools for that. There's a lot of tools on how to connect with other people, and we get a lot of messaging about be yourself. But I mean, what a scary feeling to be like, I don't know who that is. Like that I've definitely had those moments. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that on different levels, but it's something that is scary to say out loud. And that's such a tie-in to substance use disorder because the call is coming from inside the house. Like the enemy is within us when it comes to so much of, that time when we're in those years of addiction, and to have all these different parts of you kind of competing with each other. Like what part of me, what bodily need can I trust right now? Like, am I hungry? I don't know. Do I need this substance? I don't know. I feel like I do. Like my body's telling me that to survive, I need this thing. And also I'm hearing elsewhere that I will die if I use it. And maybe that's okay. And then also I'm supposed to, connect with myself. And who is that? Because I've literally never known and nobody can tell me but me. Like there's so much that goes on internally that I feel like only you can do, but also nobody gets taught how to do it. How did you do it?
I mean, I think for one thing, it's really important to be able to see yourself in spaces. And I think that is a gift that I was given, in that I didn't have a lot of experience with trans people in my life until I was much older. When I started working at the Los Angeles LGBT Center and I was really immersed in the community, that's when this whole thing really started happening for me. But, going to a recovery meeting and not seeing people that look like me, that told stories like me, I can relate to somebody's feelings and they can come from any walk of life, but an actual lived experience, I need to see that in order for me to be like, oh, that's me as well. And I didn't see it. And I think it's the same for so many minority groups that are not in big urban spaces. And even when they are in big urban spaces, just walk into a recovery meeting and see how many BIPOC folks there are and how othered it must feel when you don't look around and see yourself. It's the same for any minority. And as a trans person, I just wasn't seeing. And so how could I explore that and relate to it? And there were, now with social media, there are people who are role models in my community that identify the way that I identify. And so, the past 10 years, have been pivotal for the trans community in order to experience identity. But it was really when I allowed myself to really be in that community and meet people who are openly saying, hey, this is who I am. It was there's this freedom in it, and there's this strange thing where it's this is who I am, but it's just one part. There are so many parts to me. I am not one specific thing defines me. Yes, I think finding community is so important. And it was one of the big reasons that it propelled me to work in a deeper way with the Phoenix, because historically you have not seen a lot of trans people in workout spaces for many reasons. We're told that we're not allowed to compete in certain sports against certain people, and we're discouraged from, the government to participate in these ways. And we can't, use this bathroom, or we can't use this dressing room, or there are clothes that are not made for us. So like, how do I show up in that space when like I'm being told like, there's no place for you here?
Right.
And so I saw an opportunity there, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm willing to put myself in the front line and say, hey, this is who I am, and I don't really care what you think anymore. Like, because I have this newfound freedom, and I also feel like this is unlocked the thing that is going to save my life, which is to be me. And so I'm willing to show up in those spaces and be uncomfortable and be the only one, with the hopes that there will be others who see themselves and say, oh, I want to do that too.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it takes for that person to kind of raise their hand and step up. And then that allows for there to be a reference point, like, oh, and it's so interesting how, different communities find each other. I had an experience recently where I posted something on my Instagram in relation to 1 Million Strong, which is the campaign to affect 1 million people at the intersection of sobriety and music. And somebody from an organization reached out to me, and shout out to my man Mike Ship. And usually when people reach out, I'm kind of thinking like, okay, maybe this is like trying to figure out how organizations could go together, and I think my mind is still kind of like spinning to make that happen. But it was really just because, like, look, bro, like I'm in recovery. Like, this is what my life had looked like then, and this is what it looks like now. And man, look at you in this space where there's not a lot of us still. And I just had to just reach out to you because it's like, yo, who are you? And the past couple of conversations we've had has just been us getting to know each other, and so it's so funny how communities kind of organically come together because we need that. Okay, yeah, there's this bigger community, so this bigger community of recovery, right? But then, like, I need to know that people have had a experience in some of those more granular aspects of like being Black in recovery, or being a Black man in recovery, or being a Black man from the hood in recovery, or like, like, do you know what those things are like? Because there's certain things, I don't know, it just brings a lot of stuff up in me. Because me and Liz were like really good friends. And we're both in recovery, and we both come from, two different backgrounds. And I was thinking one day, kind of just reminiscing on some of my experiences, and I just thinking about the differences between our two experiences, and like why I experienced some of the things I experienced. And it's like, oh, because I've gone through these things, and maybe Liz has not. Like I've been in things that are specific to the areas that I come from, specific to the experience of like a young Black man that like Liz has not experienced. And so sometimes there may be like we're getting to know the world more by learning each other, because that expands our outlook and viewpoint on people from different communities. And it also like helps for me to be able to like connect with somebody who would know what it's like to get a gun pulled on them, or pull a gun on somebody, or, be in the county jail, or, you know what I'm saying? Like deal in poverty, and, like just some of these things that are specific to that experience. And so I say all that to say, once you started stepping out into these spaces and like raise your hand as being willing to like embrace who it is that you are and like be a representative of that in these spaces, how did that community begin to cultivate around you? Like what was that experience like? And like what were some key points from that?
I think about just this past weekend in Los Angeles, we had our first all trans recovery hike. And it was specifically for and led by trans people, just to go on a hike and build community in a shared experience and and what would feel like a safe experience. And that happened because I was in the gym and I was doing I was climbing and boxing and doing all of these things. And another young trans person saw me doing that and was like, oh, this is a safe space. So I can join here. I can be here. I belong here. And that person signed up to be a volunteer. And then they stepped up and said, hey, you know what? I really want to lead this thing. And I was like, yes, I'm here to support you in that. So it's just being in the space, like not even having to do anything except be there, allow somebody else to see it and say, oh, this is for me. This is a place for me as well. And that's how it like grows and expands. And, that was our first one. And I can only hope that like that continues to blossom for the trans community, but also for the larger community of recovery and even queer spaces. Like you were saying, there's a difference between like us having like this thing in common and then this thing in common, and it's like, it's great that we're all in recovery, but like sometimes we need more. And so when you get a group of people together who feel safe and allow themselves to be heard and seen, that group starts to be seen by others. And so that community grows and it meshes. And so it's not like, oh, there's this group of recovery. It's like we're all becoming a collective. But in order to fit into that collective, we need to feel some sort of unity so that we can show up in that space together.
I think, the concept of a safe space is, I guess my understanding of it is evolving. I teach yoga. And so we talk about safe spaces a lot, and at the Phoenix, we talk about safe spaces a lot and cultivating a safe space and maintaining a safe space and and it becomes meaningless if you're trying to tell someone what space is safe for them, as if I could possibly know what a safe space needs to be or feel like or look like for anybody but myself, and the arrogance of saying like, I am creating a safe space, so please come to it. Like, oh, that's, and I'm sure early in my teaching career, I'm sure I said that and it was just, oh, shudder. But like you said, like, it's not saying this is a safe space, it's showing that it's a safe space. And your very being in a space and having someone who doesn't usually see themselves reflected in anyone else there is going to make them feel safer. That's not even always the case, unfortunately. Like, I'd love to say, oh, my yoga class, come one, come all, it's safe for everyone. And, if everybody that shows up just looks like me, like, I have not succeeded because it has been a safe space for this group of people, and then that doesn't make it safe, I think, really for anybody. So I guess my question as someone who would like to be part of helping spaces to be safer, like, is there, like, if you weren't in that gym, if I was in that gym and maybe you from a few years ago walked in, like, is there any way that space could feel safer for you? And is that a bad question too? Like, that might be the wrong question to ask.
I don't think it's the bad or wrong question. I mean, I think any question, with, I'm all about intention. So it's like, what is the intention behind it? I think that, the curiosity and general desire to learn it's not a bad question. But I don't know that I can say like specifically what someone may feel or what they need. Like, I didn't necessarily know what I needed until I started showing up. I can share an experience that made me feel safe, and that changed my relationship to my participation. I did most of my physical medical transitions during the pandemic, and it was safe. I was at home. I am very privileged in that I have a family who loves, supports, and respects me. And so it was a very safe place for me to explore who I am and how I wanted to present. And when things started opening up and it was like, oh, I have to go like out into public, how do I show up now? How do I know that it's okay for me to be there? And this was such a small gesture, but one of the first in-person events that I started going to was the Phoenix bike ride. And at the time, they were being led by Andy Short. I know y'all know Andy. This gesture of Andy circling up and having everyone introduce themselves and say their pronouns, it was just so normal. And it wasn't like, oh, we're doing this for this person, or we're doing it to make this person feel comfortable. It's like, this is what we're doing because it's normal. And every week I showed up and it was normal. And we all said our pronouns. And if you wanted to say them, you could. And if you didn't want to, you didn't have to either. And it just became this normal thing. And I was like, whoa, like I feel safe here. Like I trusted that if nobody else there had my back, I felt like Andy had my back because of that small gesture. So it's like doing those things that like just say, hey, I see you and I want you to feel safe here. And I don't know if he intentionally was like, oh, I think he was doing it for everyone. I don't think it was specifically for me. But it just resounded with me in such a deep way that I was like, I'm going to keep coming back here. So I think just like recognizing that like everyone can feel othered in some way. Talking about that. Like, let's talk about that elephant in the room without pointing at one person. Because if he had said, oh, let's all introduce ourselves to Joie and their pronouns, I would have been like, bye, I gotta go now. But, it was like we were all doing it. It was a collective thing we were all practicing.
Hey, everybody, this is Andy Short. You might remember me from episode 34 of this very podcast. I am here to talk a little bit about Pride season at the Phoenix. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I know it can be hard to find sober or recovery-focused Pride spaces. Phoenix is here to change that. We got hundreds of events across the country for y'all, in person, online, social events, workouts, hikes, all kinds of amazing celebrations for the community. So come on out. If you can hear the sound of my voice, I love you personally, the person who is listening. You are loved by me. Create the space with us, and let's have an amazing Pride season. And how you can do that, it's pretty easy. Just go to your local app store, download the Phoenix app, see what's happening nearby or online, and come on out.
And I think it's an interesting conversation because it's like when you talk about safe space and just how I've come to understand it and how I've been able to contribute to rooms that have allowed for people to share in a way that I would feel are aligned with safety, psychological, physical, of course, but like psychological and emotional safety is like, how do we continue to contribute in such a way that allows for the inclusion of even the voices that aren't in the room yet? So we've created a space that allows for psychological, emotional, and physical safety. But there's a voice that maybe isn't a part of this room that requires some type of acknowledgement or an inclusion that we don't even know yet because they're not even in the room yet. But when we ask ourselves the questions like, who's not here and why? How do we continue to build this thing out as in it's not a finite process? Liz, I don't know if you want to talk about this now. What about the things that we do to consider other people and make people feel safe could perceive that as something that I'm offended by that or something like that? How do we continue to come together in understanding and compassion? Is there such thing as, and I might be just freaking bambling right now, but is there such thing as a space that includes everybody?
Do you mind if I jump in, Joy?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Just to be more, I think you were just trying to not say tell the story that I was nervous about telling, but we made a conscious choice to start saying our own pronouns because it felt right and natural, and like, of course we would, and did that knowing that because of the way our world is right now and what we see on social media right now, that there could be, someone that doesn't like that. And, the conversation that we had is that, if someone doesn't like that, there's lots of spaces where unfortunately that's not happening. And if that's something that does make folks feel safe, which is what we want to feel safe, and we feel safe in a place where more people do, then that's who we want to be the most welcomed into our community and what we're creating.
Can I just interject too, to like add like more spice to the gumbo?
Oh, I love spicy.
I'm already a little sweaty, but let's do it.
Whereas like how Liz says, of course we would. Like, I wouldn't say it is such a, and of course we would with me, because I never considered it. Because like I never, like it wasn't a part of my experience. It wasn't a part of my journey. So I didn't understand why it was important to like even like include this thing. And so it wasn't necessarily for us. And of course we would. It was like, let's have a conversation. And this is why this is important. Well, this is why I, as a person, think this is important. This is why, another great contribution to the podcast, Emma, thinks that these things are important. And like, what do you think about it? And once we sat down and had a conversation with it, then it was like, well, of course, like, why not? Like, yeah, we want to, but it wasn't an immediate, of course, because that wasn't like in my sphere of understanding. But it's like, I think that's a conversation I'm looking to have with like, how do we continue to have this conversation and create safe spaces? Because once this was brought to my attention, and then I considered it, I put it in my heart. And the way I put it in my heart was just like, if I'm in a room and, somebody was like, hey, Bryce over there, she's over there getting water from the water cooler, or she's about to get a popsicle out the freezer, or she got a mosquito bite. Right? like I would be like, why do you keep I'd be like, why do you keep calling me a she? And how I would feel about that. Like, that's not how I identify. Like, and I really feel like, why are you doing that? So that's what brought me to like, I couldn't understand how somebody who is misgendered, is that what they call it? Like, what you call it? So if somebody who's misgendered would feel like, yo, like maybe this space isn't safe for me because you keep calling me this thing that I'm not. And so, of course, yeah, that we show up and make that a space. And then, but in that decision, like Liz is talking about, there is an energy, which I didn't know this existed either, because like I'm super like unplugged from a lot of things, but there's an energy where it's like, well, if you're saying pronouns, then that it goes against, I don't know, man. I can't even speak from that perspective because I don't understand that perspective. Like, so it's just like, how do we continue to have this conversation and contribute in love and understanding and make sure that people, well, not make sure, but plant the seeds for people to have that experience that you had, Joy, where it's like, yo, like this is for me.
I mean, that is complex because everybody's needs are so different. Like, I don't think there's like one perfect safe space for everybody. I mean, you take pronouns, for example. There are some trans people who are like, let's not do the pronouns thing because I feel like you're calling me out. And I don't want to be called out. I'm just trying to fit in. So like I have to respect that person's thing, but it's like, what can we normalize? What can we, as a group in general, take and implement so that everybody feels a part of? And a big part of it, I think, is like what we talked about in the beginning, is listening. This is what I practice. When somebody tells me something, I believe them because I don't know. It's not my experience. It's not my feelings.
Yeah.
So I try to just believe them and honor that. There are things that we don't know until we know, so like there's always going to be some discomfort. There's always going to be mistakes. Like I make mistakes every day. My mother, she tries, but she misgenders me every day. But I know she's trying, and I know it's an evolution, and I know that she loves and respects me. It's just like a thing, like she knows, this person that she lived with for 49 years who identified as male. And now I'm asking her to call me and use female pronouns. And it's going to take her a while. And that's okay because I know that she loves and respects me. We're all going to get it wrong. I have a friend who blew my mind when she took the word back and she was like, I'm a fat person. And she was like, and you can refer to me as fat. And I was like, I was like, because like I always thought of that as like this derogatory thing. And it is it's a word that's weaponized against, plus size people. Oh, look at that fat, blah, blah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like saying, if you do it in a respectful way, then you can use that for me because I'm not ashamed of who I am. And so I was like, whoa, like totally mind expanding, and I just learned about this like not that long ago, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I think I'm always learning and evolving, but here was something that was not my lived experience that I knew nothing about. And she blew my mind.
Well, and that just speaks to, like you were saying earlier, something about your internalized transphobia, and like, we don't even know the phobias that they are so many of them are internalized. And, fat phobia is a big one. Like, holy smokes, that is one that I'm learning a lot about as well. And I'm so thrilled that the world is learning more about it and that people are having the courage and just self-knowing to say things like that to the people that they trust. Like, call me this. This is a word that I identify with now, and you can use it.
Yeah.
And then, for you to come and say it on a podcast, so now all the people that hear are going to hear it. Like, this is how things shift. And like Bryce was saying before, like seeds are planted, and those little ripples of change start to happen. And
I think what's big for me is just like the individualized aspect of like listening. Because just because your friend says, if you say it in a respectful way, you can call me fat, like that doesn't mean that I can go to everybody that like looks similar to that person and like, hey, my fat friend, like, and
Right.
and the key word here is listen.
yeah.
Like, listen. There is no one size fits all. Phoenix programs, we're not required to say pronouns, and if you run a program, it's not required for you to create that space, because like there's no like one size fits all. But if you notice a majority of the population coming to program and is interested in having this implemented, then like listen. Like listen, pay attention, and that's how we could be a steward of community. Even if especially if it's not our community, like our specific community that we come from, we become torchbearers. We become a steward of respect and love by listening.
And I think that love is so important in how it's experienced because for me, there was so much shame around having a substance use disorder, about acknowledging that I had a problem, and continue like that is a process that I'm like I'm still working on. But it's like, so I have shame about this. I have shame about mental health. I have shame about gender identity. Like all of these things that just weigh on a person, and keep us separate from because we feel so bad. And that's the beauty of recovery, is that we speak so openly about all of these things that we get to show up and say, hey, I love you in spite of this thing that you feel bad about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate to it because I've had similar experiences. Like that is so powerful. So it's like when we can replace that shame with love, like that's when like real magic and real change happens.
Yeah. There's something that you have spoken about and mentioned when we were, again, kind of just preparing for having you on the podcast, that I was so excited to hear you bring up. And it really touched on my shame, which is the fact that I got sober about 1,000 times and then just was not anymore, and then had to try again. And, my parents paid for an outpatient program. And so then, of course, I was going to be all better. And then I drank again. I had a DUI, and of course, that was going to be the end. And then I drank again. And like those, and being part of communities where it's like, the reason I'm my ticket to this community is my recovery. I'm in it, I did it. And then to be like, I lost my ticket, and to the fear of going back into those spaces, even though they exist for that, there's still so much shame around that You didn't have a beginning and a middle and an end of this story. And I think even those of us who speak about recovery and have these conversations all the time, it still can be a place where, like, I use humor a lot when I talk about that, aspect of my story, because I think there's still a lot that I'm healing. If you're up for talking a little bit more with us, I would love to hear about your experience there and kind of how you feel when you talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm very outspoken about this.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for you, Joey.
This is my opinion. This is my experience, and it's not something that needs to be people. I'm not asking other people to debate it or see it how I see it. I just know, this is for me. This is what I have come to learn, and this is what I have come to terms with. Is that I was told from the beginning that it's one day at a time. And all we have is today, right? Also, words matter, and how we acknowledge people matters. And oftentimes those messages are not the same.
Oh, heck no.
It's like, there are things that we throw around. Stick with the winners. Like, what does that mean? Is that the person who has long-term sobriety or continuous sobriety? So I don't have that, so I'm no longer a winner. For me, the only real threat that relapse or going back to active using has brought is that, there is a danger that I might not come back. There is a danger that I could overdose and die, but I take chances every day. I get in my car every day. There's a danger of getting in my car. It doesn't mean I don't get in my car. And I was so attached for so long to time. I was not a valid, worthy member of the recovery community if I didn't have time. That's how, and you couldn't tell me other. You could say, "Oh, yeah. We love you until you can love yourself. We're so happy you're back." But there's also snickerings that go on, of people, and there's, I don't want to be around this person because they're struggling right now and it makes me uncomfortable, or they're not safe. I think that there has to be boundaries, and knowing what is safe for me and what is not safe for me. But as far as someone's experience, I know that my capacity to experience empathy for someone who is struggling or who can't seem to keep more than days or a day is so big, because I know how uncomfortable it is. I know how shameful it is. There are practices and traditions that we do that are not intended to shame us, but they do. And I hear people all the time who will say things like, all I have is today, but then they'll rattle off their sobriety date. And it's is that, and this would be a question I would have for them, is it because you want to show somebody that long-term sobriety can work and it's possible? Or are you saying it because it's attached to your ego and you need to feel seen and important in those spaces? And so you need to rattle it off. And I would encourage anyone to ask themselves that. Mm-hmm. Ask myself it, where here is safe and hopeful messaging, and where am I living in ego? And I don't often share my sobriety date, because I just have today. I don't get to wake up today and be like, oh, you know what I did yesterday keeps me safe today, so I can do whatever I want today. I can throw caution to the wind, and I can go hang out with the people and places and things where I used to use. I still can't go to those places because yesterday's, recovery doesn't apply today. So what do I have to do today in order for me to stay present? And I don't know that there's a great answer, or if there is an answer, because everybody's going to have different opinions. I just know that I am very outspoken about, hey, you know what? I have today. I have had to go back and do more research over and over again, or I've had to pick up that tool, to handle this thing, because it's an experience that I've never had before. I had never had an experience coming out as a trans person until I was having it. So which tool was the right one for me to use for this thing that I've never experienced and I don't know who to go to talk to about it? My sponsor is not trans. So when I would go to him and ask him, he'd be like, you should find somebody who's had that experience because that is something I can't help you with, and
amazing.
I don't care. Like, I just want to see people get to thrive and live.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything that I can say to someone or any way that I can support somebody who thinks that they don't belong because they're struggling, I want them to know that I am at least one person who genuinely does not care and does not value who you are as a human being or a person in recovery based on the length of time that you have.
Thank you for saying that. That means so much. That means so much to me. And whenever something means something to any of us, I know there's others that it means a lot to. So that's really, it's beautiful and it's important to say. And I think also the parts where those moments when ego comes in, those like, stomach dropping moments when you realize something you've been doing all this time has been harmful, and maybe it's, harmful and or, comes from ego and things like that, happen to me about a dozen times a day. So I think for all the things that all of us say, or that, someone that's listening is like, oh my God, I never not say, hi, my name is so-and-so and I have this much time. Like, even if that is, something that you realize is coming from a place that you don't want to continue, like I think the message there is that it's okay to grow from where you are right now. You don't have to be at the finish line because there's no such thing. And that's such a gift.
Experiences can live in the same space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like, oh, people shouldn't identify that way. If that's your experience and that's who you are, you should absolutely do it.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to identify this way, and we can both coexist. And probably even better that we do, because then we show people that there are other experiences that you can have and still be here.
I love that so much. That's the whole point of this podcast. That was like a nice little bow we just put on this thing. I love it. Well, Joey, we're so grateful for you being on here. And also I'm realizing that we could probably do this for 3 hours and would love to. I don't know, Bryce, what do you think? Do we have 3 hours or should we?
No, we only got 3 hours today.
Come on.
Not today.
I made him be the bad guy.
We definitely appreciate this conversation with a container, a beginning, a middle, and end. And now we are reaching the end. Real quick, though, before we get up out of here, just a quick question, Joey. If you could go talk to any iteration of Joey in your life, and tell that Joey something, what iteration of Joy would you go talk to? And what would you tell her?
I know exactly who it is, because it's the version of myself that I've had the least compassion for in my life. And it's that young, probably 6-year-old who didn't understand who they were or what they were feeling, but just knew that there was something wrong. And I say that in quotation marks, like there was not something different. There was something wrong with me. And I took that and I made that become my truth for almost my whole life. So if I could say to that person, you are not wrong, you are different, you are unique, and that is perfect. Explore that, expand that, because that is the person that you are meant to be. And that is the person that is going to change not only you, but make an impact on the rest of the world. And that's what I hope that I do, is by standing in my truth every day, that I can change the world one person at a time.
Well, you definitely impacted us today on this show. And I'm sure that there'll be plenty of people that are impacted by this episode. And I love an episode with tears. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you got me. We made it to the end, but you got me.
That question does it to me every time too. Even when I think of it, I'll start to picture. Now I'm picturing you at 6 years old and just want to go walk onto that playground and give you just the biggest hug. And I'm not quite as evolved, so I might just also beat up anybody who's mean to you because I just love that little child. That is not the message we are sending to this world, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just
everybody
that.
keep your time traveling machines away from Liz because she's going to the playground and she's kicking the ass of all the 6-year-olds.
No, who is mean to you when I get my hands on this time machine? It's going to be tough though when that playground's filled with all of us, and we're all just being little jerks to each other because none of us knew what the heck we were doing. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again, Joey. This has been so just amazing as we knew it would be. And we're just so grateful. And we forget to do this almost every single time. So I'm going to do it this time. Is there any social media or websites or anything you'd like to send folks to, whether that's yours or just, Phoenix things that you've got going on?
I mean, I want everybody to go to the app every day and see what's going on. There's so many things going on that we can't even begin to post about. And there's not one specific thing, but I use social media as a tool to learn. I'm constantly scrolling and looking for new things and different voices so that I don't want to just see me and my experience. I know that experience. I want to see other people's experiences. So I look for things that don't necessarily ring true with me. Like where I go, not today. And I'm like, well, let me listen and see if there's something here. So I just encourage people to go to those places through social media, through YouTube, whatever tools you want to use, and find something that is different than you and see if there's something that resounds where you can grow and learn from.
What a great answer, man. That's beautiful. And believe people when they say who they are. I think that's just one of my favorite things that you've said this whole time. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks everybody who's listening. We love you exactly as you are, and you're perfect. And we're so grateful that you're here and listening. Please continue to, please send this episode to someone that you care about. There's so many beautiful words in here that I can't imagine anybody who wouldn't impact. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We are just grateful beyond words could even say for every person who subscribes, for your reviews, for your ratings. That makes such a difference. And we also get to hear from you, and throwing it over to Bryce for that part of the combo.
Well, how they can get to hear from us?
Yeah,
how
can they talk to us?
Well, you talk to us by having the intention that you'll reach us, and then allowing that intention to seep into your blood, and then allowing a mosquito to bite you, and then sending that mosquito. No, what you do is you hop on the Google Play Store or the App Store, go download the Phoenix app, and you'll get access to the crazy, huge community and ever-growing community of the Phoenix. When you get in there's a community group for the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. Come in there, join that community group. Come talk to me, Liz, Joie. We'll all be there. Tell us what you like about the podcast, what you like specifically about this episode, what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of. That's where you'll be able to find us. So go download that app, Google Play, App Store, community group in the app. Come holler at us directly.
And thank you both for this opportunity. This was amazing. I'm super grateful to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for showing.
Thank you. All right, everybody. We will see you next time.
Catch you later.
Bye.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.